No select committee reports have been presented. The clerk has been informed of the introduction of a bill.
Contract and Commercial Law Bill, introduction.
That bill is set down for first reading. The House comes to questions for oral answer. Question number 1 in the name of Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Does he have confidence in his Minister for Building and Housing?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, yes.
Better than the last answer.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Order. Andrew Little, supplementary question.
How can he have confidence in bumbling Nick Smith, who promised 500 hectares of new housing on Crown land last budget, but only found 13 hectares and is now claiming he never made any promise at all?
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Apologies, I just couldn't hear the question.
Then I'll allow the question to be heard. It would be. Order. Order. The question, as I heard it, was certainly one that was going to lead to some interjection, but so it is heard clearly. I don't want any interjection, particularly from my right-hand side. Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'm obliged. How can he have confidence in Nick Smith, who promised 500 hectares of new housing on Crown land last budget, but only found 13 hectares, he's over there, and is now claiming he never made any promise at all?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I have confidence in the Minister of Building and Housing because he's undertaking a wide range of initiatives when it comes to housing. And what we're seeing is a considerable increase in the number of houses that are being built. And yesterday the Minister announced that 3 sites in Auckland will be paving the way for 750 new homes. And combined with Moira Road last year, it's a total of 940 homes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Given his statement about housing, quotes, "I don't think it's a crisis," end quotes, why does Statistics New Zealand data show falling home ownership rates every quarter under his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I always have to check those facts when I see them from the Labor Party, but Mr Speaker, home ownership rates actually around the world have been reducing. But one thing we do know is under this government, we're helping a lot of people into their first home. One example of that is nearly 12,000 people have been helped into their first home under the Home Start grant scheme, totalling $555.6 million, I should say.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Point of order, Andrew Little.
I seek leave to table information provided by Parliamentary Library on the dwelling and household figures and ownership rates that show a declining proportion of home ownership
the
every
document's
quarter.
been described. Before I put it, it's not simply a précis of Stats New Zealand, is it?
Not at all, Mr
Okay,
Speaker.
then
it is an analysis of data.
I'll put the leave. I'll put the leave. Order. Leave has been sought to table the information prepared by the Parliamentary Library. Is there any objection to it being tabled? There is none. It can be tabled.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary.
Order. Order. Can I just have a little less assistance from Mr Brownlee? Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
That's a reflection on the Speaker. Is Kim Campbell, Chief Executive of the Employers and Manufacturers Association Northern, right when he says, quotes, "Whatever's happening now, it's not working," end quotes, and what we need is a massive government-led house building program, which, funny enough, sounds a lot like Labor's Kiwi Builder program?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, he's absolutely right when he says whatever is happening now is not working, if he's talking about the Labor Party.
Order. 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 To my left, the Leader of the Opposition is asking for a supplementary question. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. When Kim Campbell, the CTU's Richard Wagstaff and even Paula Bennett say there's a crisis, why doesn't he admit the government's housing policies have just failed?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Government's response in housing has been quite comprehensive, and that's why we're seeing 9,500 new homes being built in Auckland, the highest for more than 11 years. Mr Speaker, that's why we're seeing more people employed in construction. That's why we are seeing people accessing KiwiSaver Home Start to get in their homes. Mr Speaker, this is a an issue which takes quite a lot of catch-up because of the work that's required. But I will say this government, and under Minister Smith, has been implementing a wide range of policies. The previous government sat around for 9 years and did absolutely nothing.
Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Have any of these government policies reversed the fall in home ownership? 1, cheaper gibboard, which has now got more expensive. 2, trying to build houses on cemeteries. Or 3, building less than 3% of the promised 39,000 houses in special housing areas.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, once again, the member wishes to make things up and he's welcome to do that. But Mr Speaker, I tell you what is working, and that is the fact that 24,000 houses and sections have been consented in the first 2 years of the Housing Accord, that there are 154 now special housing areas in Auckland, that the rules have been tightened on property investors, that more Crown land has been released, that thousands and thousands of people, in fact 42,000 I think additional people are in the area of housing and construction. Mr Speaker, a great deal is happening in Auckland housing.
Everybody else is wrong.
Order. Order. Order, Mr Brownlee. Supplementary question, Andrew Little.
Isn't it time to stop the excuses and admit that after 8 years, it's the failure of his policies that means home ownership has fallen every quarter under his government?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, firstly, we reject the assertion from the member, but secondly, Mr Speaker, as I've pointed out already today, there are a great many initiatives that the government has undertaken, and I just look back at the 9 years under the previous Labor government and all we saw was interest rates going up.
Order. 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 Materia Ture, supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why is his government prioritising the building of 4,500 new hotel rooms for tourists as part of Project Palace, when those resources could be directed to the Minister for Building and Housing to help build homes for the 4,500 people on the State House waiting list?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, there are different issues, of course. One is around tourism and the fact that it's become such a massive employer in New Zealand now, and I would have thought that the member would want to welcome that. Much of the hotels that are being built will be decided by the private sector ultimately if they want to invest in them, but they're in places like Queenstown. This might come as a shock to the member, but not every builder that lives in New Zealand wants to move to Auckland.
Supplementary. Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Doesn't the Prime Minister think that in the midst of a housing crisis, his government should prioritise Project Homes for New Zealanders and not Project Palace for tourists?
The Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, I reject the member's assertion.
Okay.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Well, is this the Prime Minister's new social housing policy, where he builds expensive hotel rooms so that homeless people can stay in them and rack up huge debts to wins instead?
Right Honourable Prime
Mr
Minister.
Speaker, no.
Order. Supplementary question, Materia Ture.
Does he genuinely think that the 4,500 people on the waiting list for a State House and the more than 30,000 New Zealanders in severe housing deprivation does not mean that we are in a national housing emergency, one that demands his full attention?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, like many issues the government faces, this does have my full attention. What you've already seen announced by the Minister of Social Development is $41 million being applied to 3,000 places, some which are new and some existing, but they allow people to access what will no longer be a loan but a grant for social housing. You've also seen the government moving for income-related rents now for social housing providers. You've seen the government insulate nearly 300,000 homes. You've seen the government making sure that there are renewable tenancies so those with the greatest need can move on. You've seen the government working in areas like Tamaki redevelopment. The government is doing a great deal of work in this area.
The answer's long enough. Question number 2, the Right Honourable Winston Peters.